The Oval Office is calm, but the message coming out of it is anything but. Cameras click as President Donald Trump leans forward, his tone deliberate, his words chosen to carry weight. "We are certainly looking at land now," he says, "because we've got the sea very well under control." For weeks, American warships have been tracking and targeting vessels off the coast of Venezuela, boats that US intelligence claims are ferrying cocaine and weapons through Caribbean waters. Now, for the first time, the president is signaling that those operations could move inland. The question hanging in the air: is the United States preparing for a new phase of confrontation with Venezuela? This announcement comes after a string of maritime strikes that Washington describes as part of a renewed counter-narcotics campaign. The Pentagon has been tight-lipped, but regional analysts confirm multiple incidents in which US aircraft engaged small boats allegedly linked to Venezuelan criminal networks. The operations have been swift, precise, and controversial, raising alarm among humanitarian groups and governments in Latin America who fear the US may be edging toward open conflict. From Caracas, the response is furious. President Nicolas Maduro's government denounces what it calls acts of piracy and aggression in international waters. State media broadcast images of charred hulls and angry fishermen claiming innocent civilians were caught in the crossfire. "They attack our sovereignty," one anchor declares. "They fabricate lies about drug cartels to justify their military presence." But inside Washington, the narrative is starkly different. Administration officials argue that the US has both the legal right and the strategic duty to strike at what they describe as transnational criminal enterprises protected by the Venezuelan state. The Department of Defense points to satellite imagery showing suspicious coastal convoys and nighttime loading operations near Puerto La Cruz and La Guaira. "These aren't fishing boats," a Pentagon spokesperson tells reporters. "They're floating laboratories of narcotics and weapons." Behind the scenes, military planners have been studying land-based targets, airstrips, storage compounds, and suspected cartel facilities that intelligence suggests operate with the tacit approval of local militias and elements within Venezuela's armed forces. Trump's phrasing, "looking at land," isn't accidental. It's a public trial balloon, a way to test global reaction before escalation. The domestic political calculus is clear. Trump's administration has long framed Venezuela as both a security threat and a moral test for the hemisphere, a nation where socialism and criminality converge. By pushing the drug war narrative, the White House seeks to justify stronger measures without declaring open hostilities. It's a message calibrated for multiple audiences: to Congress that the administration is acting decisively, to allies that Washington won't tolerate lawless regimes, and to Maduro that American reach extends far beyond the coastline. The strategic backdrop matters. Since early 2025, the US Southern Command, known as SOUTHCOM, has expanded operations across the Caribbean basin. American destroyers patrol shipping lanes once dominated by smugglers, and drones crisscross airspace once deemed too risky for surveillance. Officials boast that the maritime flow of cocaine from Venezuela has dropped sharply, by as much as 40%, according to internal estimates. But those same officials acknowledge a new challenge: cartels adapting by shifting inland, building makeshift runways deep inside Venezuelan territory, and using armed militias as escorts. In that context, Trump's remark is less spontaneous and more of a preview. The administration is already mapping what insiders call Phase 2, a shift from interception at sea to interdiction on land. Such a move would demand cooperation from neighboring countries, Colombia, Guyana, and Brazil, all wary of becoming launching grounds for cross-border raids. Bogotá's leadership is cautious. Colombian officials privately express support for hitting narco-trafficking networks, but fear being dragged into a proxy confrontation. "We cannot be the springboard for a foreign invasion," one senior Colombian diplomat says. Brazil's government echoes that sentiment, emphasizing that regional security must not come at the cost of national sovereignty. In the Caribbean, smaller nations like Trinidad and Barbados are equally uneasy. Their ports and refineries depend on Venezuelan oil and trade. "If the US starts bombing inland, refugees will come here," says a regional security advisor. "And then what? We don't have the capacity to absorb that kind of crisis. Inside Venezuela, reports suggest heightened tension among the armed forces. Intelligence leaks indicate that some military commanders, especially along the northern coast, are quietly redeploying anti-aircraft batteries. Others are retreating to fortified compounds. The Maduro government insists that its sovereignty will be defended with all means necessary. At the United Nations, reactions are split. European diplomats urge restraint, warning that unilateral strikes could violate international law. The French ambassador calls for collective accountability through the UN framework. Russia and China issue sharp condemnations, accusing Washington of neo-imperial tactics. Moscow's foreign ministry warns that aggression under the pretext of anti-narcotics operations will not go unanswered. Meanwhile, in Miami and Washington, supporters of Trump's hardline approach argue that Maduro's regime thrives on chaos and that a show of force is the only language Caracas understands. Every other president talked about sanctions, says one conservative commentator. Trump is doing something about it. But critics counter that the administration's actions risk dragging the United States into another endless conflict. Former diplomats recall past US interventions in Latin America, from Panama in 1989 to the covert operations in Nicaragua, and warn that history rarely ends neatly. Once you hit land targets, you own the aftermath, says a retired general. Cartels rebuild, civilians die, and suddenly you're policing a foreign country again. The political timing also raises questions. The US is heading into a heated election cycle, and tough talk on security plays well with parts of Trump's base. Every drone strike and televised briefing reinforces the image of a president taking decisive action abroad. Yet humanitarian agencies warn of ripple effects already visible on the ground. Refugee flows from Venezuela's interior have surged. Aid convoys describe border crossings filled with displaced families, terrified of new bombings. In Washington, the Pentagon maintains that all targets have been vetted through a rigorous intelligence process. Officials stress that precision operations minimize civilian harm. Still, leaked satellite imagery reviewed by journalists suggests at least 2 strikes landed within populated zones, one near a coastal village north of Cumaná. The Venezuelan opposition, long critical of both Maduro and Trump, calls for international mediation. Venezuelans are dying between 2 powers, says opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. One claims to protect us, the other claims to liberate us. Both are using us. The stakes go beyond Venezuela. Analysts point out that narco-trafficking networks span across South and Central America, linking actors in Mexico, Colombia, and even West Africa. A US land operation in Venezuela could set a precedent, one that justifies similar actions elsewhere. It's a slippery slope from interdiction to intervention, warns a Latin America scholar. For Trump, the gamble is clear. Act boldly, show strength, and force adversaries to react. It's a strategy consistent with his foreign policy pattern, unpredictable but attention-grabbing. When he says we've got the sea under control, it's both a boast and a signal of readiness for escalation. The next step, looking at land, is designed to keep both allies and enemies guessing. In Caracas, Maduro's government stages rallies denouncing Yankee aggression. The crowds chant slogans against Washington while armed militias patrol neighborhoods. The government releases images of recovered missile fragments alleging US involvement. Analysts cannot verify the claims, but the propaganda war intensifies. Back in Washington, journalists press for details. Will there be US boots on the ground? Will strikes target government facilities or only cartel compounds? Trump refuses to elaborate. You'll see, he says, smiling slightly. We're not talking about it, but we're doing a great job. That ambiguity, half promise, half threat, is deliberate. It keeps the initiative with the White House, leaving adversaries to anticipate. Yet beneath the bravado lies a dangerous uncertainty. Where does the line between anti-narcotics and anti-government action truly lie? For now, all eyes are on the Caribbean coast, where silence at sea could soon give way to thunder on land. Intelligence sources indicate an increase in reconnaissance flights over central Venezuela. Local residents report hearing unfamiliar aircraft at night, and deep inside the Pentagon, planners refine maps of potential targets, balancing political messaging with operational risk. The world has seen this pattern before, one where limited military engagement expands quietly until it becomes a defining foreign policy crisis. Whether Trump's land strikes materialize or remain a threat on paper, the consequences are already visible. A region on edge, a government under pressure, and a superpower testing the limits of its reach. For Venezuelans caught in between, the words from Washington and Caracas carry the same echo: uncertainty, fear, and fatigue. We don't know who to believe anymore, says a fisherman from Sucre State, his boat burned in one of the naval raids. They say it's about drugs, but all we see are bombs. As night falls over the Caribbean, the diplomatic cables continue to fly and military satellites keep watch. The Oval Office remains silent for now, but the world has heard the message clearly. The United States, in Trump's words, has the sea under control. What happens next on land could reshape the balance of power across the entire hemisphere.